Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow!
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow!
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Tracking Hurricane Delta right now on the Weather Channel. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren. This is currently a Category 2 hurricane. It's possible to get up to a Category 3. Whether or not it stays as a 3 or drops back down, regardless, there's going to be hurricane force winds. There will be tropical storm force winds well inland. In fact, hurricane force winds also expected to go pretty far inland as well. And we're going to go ahead and time out the areas when the worst of the weather is going to arrive coming soon here on the Weather Channel. Top of the hour and get into all of that here. Just want to kind of lay the land where I am right here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the state capital of Louisiana. This is Interstate 10. That's going over the Mississippi River, and off in the distance, Carl and I were talking earlier about all the different types of interest. This is where some of the biggest, it's about as far north into the Mississippi River, where some of those big ocean faring vessels can go, some of these big ships. This is about the end of the line for those. The ships that can still make it through, they're big enough to go through the Panama Canal, so some of the big vessels can get this far up. We're about 150 miles from the mouth of the Mississippi River here, and some of the petrochemical plants are very obvious from air and from land sometimes. You can see on the horizon a little bit of fire that is burning from, I believe, is one of those facilities, those petrochemical facilities out there. But again, the Mississippi River, as it drains and meanders, it's a meandering stream, a meandering river, as it flows out to the Gulf of Mexico. It's about 150 miles if the crow is taking the shortcut, but probably a little bit longer than that if you're on a vessel, on a boat. But in a different direction, a little bit farther to the southwest, this is due south. We're at a point here in Baton Rouge where the Mississippi River really does a true north-south as it meanders down to the Gulf. But if you go in that direction, a little bit off to the southwest, getting to the Gulf of Mexico, as the crow flies, is only about 50 miles. Or 60 miles. It just kind of depends exactly where you go and what you consider the exact coast, because you're going to reach water before you get to the distinct coastline. But it's that interface where the water is and where land is that surge is going to be an issue. Storm specialist Carl Parker is with us here talking about the wind and the surge. And Carl, in this case, how big, not just intense and strong the winds are, but how large this system eventually gets also makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, Chris. In fact, size is one of the more important controlling factors when you talk about surge. And yesterday we were talking about Charley. Hurricane Charley was a Category 4 storm that came into southwest Florida, but the area of strongest winds was only about 7 miles wide, about a quarter of average. And so it really didn't produce that much surge when it came into southwest Florida. Conversely, you can have a storm that's not as strong, but very, very large, and it produces terrific surge. And, certainly that's going to be among our many concerns. We're thinking probably 7 to 11 feet at maximum, and that's going to probably be maximized around Vermilion Bay, around that area, if the storm comes in somewhere between Lake Charles and Lafayette. And of course, Chris, we're so concerned about what is going to happen in Lake Charles. Going back to 2004, I have a friend who lives in Orlando, and he actually got hit by 4 hurricanes that year, or at least brushed by 4 hurricanes that year. And he said that it was just emotionally exhausting to have to deal with that again and again and again. And then here you got, and you were showing the pictures earlier, all these people with the blue tarps on their roofs. So they haven't even restored their homes yet. And here we've got another hurricane on the way.
Yeah, and the hurricane is packing some very strong winds. But talking about Lake Charles, Carl, that they don't have to be hurricane force winds to be devastating again to homes that are vulnerable still. I mean, think about that. You've got a blue tarp on the roof that's trying to keep the water out. You know, and what's that, you know, if the last storm came through and took off shingles and parts of rooftops, you know, how much wind is that going to be able to handle? Probably not a lot.
Yeah. And then on top of that, if you remove that tarp relatively quickly, and then you get, you know, 3-4 inches of rain on top of that, well, you know, maybe you were able to repair the house before, but maybe in this case, with all that rain damage on top of, you know, everything that's happened before, maybe that's enough to actually finally do a structure in, Chris.
Yeah, just can't at all imagine what people are going through right now and how stressful it has to be, and certainly hoping for, especially in Lake Charles, a little bit of movement off to the east with this storm. We'll talk about the chances that it could still deviate from the forecast line and how strong it possibly could be when it makes landfall as we track Hurricane Delta here on the Weather Channel.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network,
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
the Weather Channel.
We are tracking Hurricane Delta here on the Weather Channel. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren here in Louisiana state capital of Baton Rouge, where the LSU game for this weekend has been moved to Columbia, Missouri. And we're expecting a lot of offices and organizations to be either limiting what is done tomorrow or just being closed for the day tomorrow as Hurricane Delta makes its way onshore in Louisiana, making landfall somewhere in the southwest part of the state. Here, there's a tropical storm warning in effect. So tropical storm conditions are expected here in Baton Rouge. Also, flash flood watches extending really from the coastline all the way up through a big portion of the state of Louisiana and then getting as far north possibly as Tennessee with that flood threat. And there's a severe weather threat with this as well. And then the strong winds with the hurricane as it makes landfall, possibly in what has already been a hard hit Lake Charles, Louisiana, still recovering from Hurricane Laura and a lot of blue tarps on those homes. But today is the day. It's the day before Delta. The storm will be making its presence known in a big way during the morning tomorrow and through much of the day, just working inland from the south to the north and going into the overnight hours here in Louisiana into Saturday morning. And these threats for severe weather will continue again on Saturday with showers. I want to go to storm specialist Carl Parker right now with a look at the latest. Carl, this storm is this hurricane is still moving to the northwest. We're expecting a turn. And I think one of the big things that a lot of people want to know, of course, is where exactly is it going? And how strong is it going to be when it gets there? Because the forecast still is a Category 3 at some point.
Yeah, that's right. And intensity forecasting is very, very tricky. The storm right now just holding its own, basically. And we'll take a look at what some of the modeling is showing us here in just a moment. So we got a new advisory from the Hurricane Center. The hurricane hunters have been out in the system, and they're just holding steady at 105 miles per hour, Category 2 storm right now. And as we look at the visible imagery, you can see that a little bit of an eye has been trying to develop over the last couple of hours, a little more well-defined in just the last couple couple of images. You also notice there's a little bit of, you can see just a little bit of thinness to the clouds on the underside of the system right in there. So I think some drier air is coming in, wrapping around the underside and maybe getting into the east side of the circulation as well. So here's the forecast from the Hurricane Center, expecting for it to get up to 110 tonight, 115 tomorrow, and then as it's coming in somewhere around 105, a Category 2 storm, and then weakening beyond that. But it's going to be moving right along, so it's going to bring those hurricane force winds well inland. Now, here you see the intensity forecast and also the landfall point. So you see that decline in intensity that's occurring at landfall. So, at least we are going to see a decline there, but we do expect, again, hurricane force winds to make their way well inland. Now, let's talk about track. There's the forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center. Here is the American model forecast with pretty much down the center of that. Here are the ensemble members of the GFS, and they're a little more heavily weighted towards the right side of that track. So a little more weighted in areas around Lafayette as opposed to Lake Charles. You look at the rest of the track guidance here, and it's pretty much centered in areas from Lake Charles to Vermilion Bay and towards Lafayette there. And then when we look at the European model track guidance as well, it is just a little farther west and more towards the west side of the forecast cone there and more towards Lake Charles and areas near Lafayette. So, in terms of the broad strokes, we basically think that that is where the storm is going to go, southwest Louisiana. The only question is it going to slide? Is the core of that storm, the most dangerous part of the storm, is that going to slide just east of Lake Charles, or is it going to be more squarely over Lake Charles? That is the National Hurricane Center forecast right there, and we'll see what time brings. But we can only hope, Jackie, that the worst of the storm does pass just to the east of Lake Charles, but certainly we cannot count on that.
Yeah, it's going to be a close shave for sure. Lake Charles is in Calcasieu Parish, by the way. And joining us now on the phone is Dick Gremion. He's the director of Calcasieu Parish Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness in Louisiana. First of all, thanks so much for joining us. I feel like before we can even get to what's coming, we have to take a look at where we've been. It's been 6 weeks since Laura. What is the status of the damage still across the area?
Well, actually, we had made remarkable progress on restoration of power, debris cleanup, about 98 or 99% power restoration, and probably about maybe a third to half of our debris at least picked up where the major roads and everything were clear. But unfortunately, that may be undone by this hurricane.
Yeah, a lot of places are compromised. That debris may get lofted once again. We're seeing so many blue tarps in some of the video that we've been receiving as of late. What are you doing in terms of evacuations for people here as a result?
Well, we've issued a mandatory evacuation for the parish, and we are now transporting people who don't have transportation. We've provided some buses for them, and that's been going along pretty well. But we still had thousands of people who were evacuated from Hurricane Laura that have not returned home yet. So, the major concern is just what you said, those blue tarps. We have a lot of structures here. Probably almost every dwelling, almost every business had some sort of structural damage to them. And even a Category 2 hurricane like this has potential for some real harm to our buildings here.
How is that evacuation process going? We've been seeing video and hearing stories of a lot of backups on the interstates.
There are a lot of people on the interstate right now. There's a long line of traffic. I'm looking out the window of my office right here in downtown Lake Charles, and there's a very long line of cars heading out to the interstate.
How is the process of the assisted evacuations going, and is everybody going to get out on time?
We think it's going pretty well. Like I said, we normally would expect about 1,000 to 1,500 people who don't have who don't have transportation.
For somebody, go ahead.
Many of them are still in shelters in New Orleans from Hurricane Laura. So far we've evacuated a couple hundred, and that could be good news that there are just not that many people that need a ride right now.
If there are people out there that are watching right now and need assistance, what advice do you have to them?
We are advising them to call our 211 number. They'll get advice there on how to handle their situation, and they will arrange for them to get a ride out of the area.
This is tough for a lot of people, emotionally as well. How are people doing? And is there any assistance emotionally for people?
It's when you talk to people here, they're still in shock from the effects of being impacted by a Category 4 hurricane. So when you ask them today, I mean, I get a lot of blank faces because no one really knows what to think about this. I mean, how many times does a community get hit twice in 1 year with major hurricanes? So it's very, very troubling and very telling on the people that live here.
Yeah, we're really feeling for you all and wishing you the best. Dick Gremillion, thank you so much for being with us today. He's the director of Calcasieu Parish's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. Want to go back out live to our Chris Warren. He's in Baton Rouge. You know, Chris, it's hard to imagine dealing with one, not let alone two. And when you think about it, the state of Louisiana as a whole, this is going to be the 4th landfalling tropical system. That will be a record.
Yeah, and just to get that in 4 years would be a big deal, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, just for what you would have to go through. But today is the day before the hurricane comes on shore. We're going to talk with Carl in a bit about intensity and the track of the storm in a moment. But let's just also remember, we got a lot of people, millions of people in the path of this. And where we are here in Baton Rouge, the Louisiana state capital, over the Mississippi River, just going up and looking at Interstate 10 and just getting a look at all of the big rigs that are traversing across the bridge over the Mississippi, all of the other cars in there, just so many different people with different interests, different responsibilities. Their jobs may be on hold tomorrow. Some of these people, if they're government employees here in Baton Rouge, they're not working tomorrow. Government offices for the parish and for the city are going to be closed for tomorrow. LSU is going to be closed tomorrow. The game is not happening here at Tiger Stadium. It's going to be happening in Missouri, in Columbia. And again, a lot of people going to have their lives, at the very least, disrupted, inconvenienced. But then there's the other end, the people in Lake Charles and the people that are going to be in the direct path of the worst of the weather that are going to be having to recover, and their lives could be altered for a long, long time. And both, in some cases, physical damage to property, and then all the emotional damage as well that comes with the worry and the stress, both before, during, and then after the storm. So where this storm goes is so important to so many people. Storm specialist Carl Parker is with us. And again, Carl, the stakes are high when we talk about hurricanes, tropical storms, and even depressions. And as also we've seen in parts of Louisiana a few years ago, unnamed tropical systems can also do devastating flooding. While flooding isn't the main threat here, I mean, it is a threat. It's always a threat with tropical systems. But the speed of this is going to help at least reduce the threat of flooding. Flash flood watches are extending, so it's possible we're going to see a lot of flooding even well inland. But also, Carl, you mentioned earlier, the nature of the fast-moving storm means that the momentum going in, there could be some very strong winds well inland, away from the coast.
Yeah, a lot of the state of Louisiana is going to be in for a very strong wind, even up into Arkansas and Mississippi. And Chris, I just wanted to mention, I don't know if you heard the interview just before we came to you, but we were talking to someone from the Department of Homeland Security, a gentleman from Homeland Security, and he was asked about how they're handling this in Lake Charles, and he paused for a moment, and he said that, I think people are still in a state of shock, which really struck me. I mean, you think about it. Think about how devastating a Category 4 hurricane is and how it just completely, it affected, I think, just about every part of Lake Charles in some form or fashion, in many ways to devastating degrees. And then here, you've barely gotten time to process all of that and just to start to think about how you're going to get your life together, and you're talking to the insurance company, and you're working on getting your home restored, and you've got this tarp on your roof in the meantime, and here comes another one And I can't. I just don't think we can stress this enough. It is heartbreaking. I so hope that they can avoid the worst of this storm. We can't count on it, unfortunately, but I so hope that they can. But you're talking about a large, powerful storm. They're going to be affected. The question is just how much, to what degree.
And Carl, let's not like to put that back on you right now. Let's talk about Lake Charles, and let's talk about the forecast track and what are the possibilities right now for Lake Charles. Both the, I hate to say it, what's the worst case scenario, reasonable worst case scenario, and what's the reasonable best case scenario for Lake Charles, do you think?
Well, the worst case scenario is that we see winds gusting over 110 miles per hour in Lake Charles for several hours. Now, at least the storm is going to be moving, and so it's going to be a period of several hours, probably developing tomorrow evening in Lake Charles, maybe around 6 to 7 o'clock, and then continuing 8 to 9 to 10 to 11, and then starting to wane in the overnight. I want to show you the forecast track from the Hurricane Center, and then here you see the GFS model, which is just a little to the east of Lake Charles, and then a lot of the ensemble members associated with the GFS also just a little to the east of Lake Charles. And then when you add some of these other hurricane models, they show a range of possibilities from Lake Charles over towards Lafayette. And then the European model ensemble members again show a range of possibilities from Lake Charles over to Lafayette. So, in terms of the broad strokes, there's a terrific amount of model agreement. We know that the storm is basically going to southwest Louisiana, but just a little bit of deviation can make a very big difference. This, by the way, is the forecast from the National Hurricane Center. And so, as the current forecast stands, the core of the storm may just graze Lake Charles on the west side there of that eye wall, but that's if this forecast stands. A little bit of a deviation to the left would mean much, much more impact in Lake Charles, and a little bit of a deviation to the right would mean much less impact in Lake Charles, because it's that core of the storm that is the very most dangerous part of the storm. And so, that is what we are so concerned about, Chris, where exactly this thing is going to go relative to Lake Charles, in particular because they have been knocked back on their heels so thoroughly already. And, our hearts going out to these people. The level of worry has got to be through the roof. And I'm just so sorry to be reporting this.
Yeah, it is an absolutely awful situation. I mean, we see the pictures and we see the video, but there's things that we just don't know about. Someone may have, they can't be at home, so they're somewhere else. And maybe that somewhere else is a place that now has to evacuate. So such a horrible, horrible situation for so many people in South Louisiana right now, with another hurricane bearing down on the state, Hurricane Delta.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
It's for the doors, just to keep it, to secure it. Normally, we don't stay here, but since the pandemic, we're not gonna run the risk of going off. So, gonna take it one day at a time.
Complicated times indeed here. Here's a look at the French Quarter, a live look right now. It doesn't take a lot of rain to flood parts of New Orleans and parts of Louisiana, frankly. It can be easily flooded. Right now, this is a steamy French Quarter, 88 degrees at the moment. We are tracking Hurricane Delta. It looks like Louisiana's gem of a city, its largest city, New Orleans, is going to escape the worst of this, but being out of the cone, but there's still going to be impacts. The impacts happen outside of the cone. So stormy conditions are going to happen outside of the cone. Here we are in the second largest city here in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, also the state capital. There's also going to be impacts here. Tropical storm warning is in effect. Today's the day to be ready. Tomorrow, there's if you have any city or parish interests here in Baton Rouge, not happening. Those will be closed. City offices and parish offices here in Baton Rouge will be closed. LSU, Louisiana State University, also closed tomorrow. So with that, let's take a look at the timing for this. There's a few showers, could be some thunderstorms coming through here in Baton Rouge later on today, but the forecast for tomorrow is going to be, as the storm moves to the north, we're going to see these winds start gusting up to about 35 miles an hour. It's possible, we can't rule out, with tropical storm force conditions happening, that winds could be gusts 50, possibly 55 miles an hour. Now, 2 to 3 inches is something you think you could handle here in Baton Rouge, which is certainly the case, unless, of course, that happens at in a short period of time. Where I am right now, standing on a levee on the banks of the Mississippi River, no chance that's going to flood. Pretty low anyways, and we're not dealing with such a slow-moving system, but flash flooding is a possibility. As far as the wind goes, we're going to watch that pick up, and it's going to pick up throughout the day. And I think some of the worst weather happening in the evening, possibly into the overnight hours, getting from South Louisiana into Central Louisiana, and then eventually into the northeast part of the state. And from there, parts of Arkansas, portions of Mississippi, and parts of Tennessee also need to be on alert for strong winds. Also thunderstorms, the winds that could come with that as well. And flash flood watches also extending for several parishes and counties well north of the coastline, where some areas could see close to about 10 inches of rainfall with this. So we talk about the fact that the storm is going to be moving fast. It's going to be relatively fast, of course. And so that's going to minimize the flood threat, but Jackie, it doesn't eliminate that flood threat, because that is a lot of rain, and that much rain, even over a half day's time, could cause some serious problems. So flash flooding is a possibility. Got to stress that. But it does not look like a widespread, devastating rainfall situation.
No, but there's a large area that we actually have to watch for it, too. So it will be more localized, but there's a big area, a lot of populated areas that are going to be dealing with that inland flood threat. And this could ultimately turn into a river flood issue as well, probably on a more of a moderate scale in terms of river flooding. Hard to believe that's on the way when you look at this beauty right now, huh? Look at that, Charlotte. You are looking fabulous right now. Beautiful blue skies, your temperatures in the lower 80s right now. Enjoy today, because heavy rain is on the way for Charlotte, and you may very well be picking up a couple of inches of rain as we head towards the end of your weekend into early next week. So keep that in mind. Other areas we really have to watch too, believe it or not, are areas that are still reeling from storms yesterday. This is New England, the Charlestown neighborhood into the Boston area. There you can see ferry passengers facing a really rough ride as squall line hit this area during yesterday afternoon. By Monday, the remnants of Delta and a cold front will be bringing rain to the area. There's still a lot of people without power, by the way, in the state of Massachusetts, about 70,000 people. So rain will be spreading in from the south, heading across the Tennessee Valley, into the Ohio River Valley, into the mid-Atlantic states, and yep, even into New England. So it's kind of a combination of these factors. And the area that I'm most concerned about will really be where terrain is a player in all of this. So watching the Appalachian chain, southern and central spots where we will get a little extra lift because of the mountains here, and that could squeeze out more than 3 inches in a few spots, and that's what would lead to the flash flooding. Now, this high pressure system combined with Delta will kind of work to funnel together all that moisture. So not only is it coming in from Delta and the Gulf, it's also going to be coming in from the Atlantic, all getting driven off towards the east by that trough and a cold front developing at the surface. So that moisture gets concentrated and leads up against that frontal boundary, and then it helps to kind of squeeze it all out in some of these spots to bring the heavy downpours. At a minimum, it's going to be a real travel nuisance for folks across parts of the east. So the big focus, of course, tomorrow tomorrow is going to be around landfall in the Gulf Coast. Into Saturday, I'm still watching places like Greenville, Mississippi, and Memphis, Tennessee, where I think you could get some really heavy downpours. Now we got some concerts, outdoor concerts actually taking place in Tennessee Saturday night into Sunday. That's likely going to be a washout as we head towards Monday. This is along I-95 into the northeast, and by Tuesday, it's all out of here. Make sure you tune in to SiriusXM, channel 721 for coverage.
A woman.
It's almost unbelievable. This is real.
When your cameras roll,
This is something nobody can imagine.
our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh. Jaw-dropping.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow.
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
You're watching the Weather Channel as we are tracking Hurricane Delta and Lake Charles once again back in the cone. See the damage on the left from late September, about a month and a half ago. And once again, back in the cone, pretty squarely in the cone as well. Possible this could be shifting. We'll let you know with the next update from the National Hurricane Center. But something's going to happen in Lake Charles. There will be some strong winds and some very heavy rain as well. So we're going to have some stormy conditions, possibly hurricane force winds. That certainly is a possibility with this. So much of Louisiana is going to feel something from this hurricane, whether or not it's a hurricane when it gets to the central part of the state or the northern part of the state, and then it'll move on pretty quickly. Should be out of here by late Saturday into early Sunday for the entire state, really, of Louisiana. But the first approach will be coastal areas. And so Chairman of the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority, Chip Klein, is kind enough to join us here. And Chip, thank you for coming out to speak with us. First, can you explain what the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority is and what you're looking at with the storm?
Sure. So the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority was formed after Hurricane Katrina, and our main mission is hurricane protection, protecting the people of coastal Louisiana from events like these, from hurricanes that are coming on shore, as well as restoring coastal Louisiana from the various factors that cause coastal land loss across the southern perimeter of our state.
Now, that actual restoration, correct me if I'm wrong, but that actually plays a role in protecting, correct?
Sure. I mean, a lot of people don't understand how critical our natural buffers are, our coastal marshes, our coastal wetlands. And when most people think about those, they think about habitat for wildlife and fisheries, but they don't really understand that those wetlands actually serve as a critical storm buffer when a surge is coming online. So when you're talking about a storm that's coming online in southwest Louisiana, the only thing between populated areas in southwest Louisiana and the Gulf of Mexico are our coastal marshes. And so that's why you've seen the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority in recent years restore over 6 square miles of land. Over 4,000 acres of new land have been created to knock down that storm surge and create that natural habitat for our wildlife and fisheries.
And that restoration is, it takes time. It's a long, process. You have to wait for, things to grow, et cetera. Is there anything you can do in the days leading up to an expected landfall that can help protect coastal areas?
Well, I think, look, when you're talking about a hurricane that's coming online in southwest Louisiana, that's a completely different ballgame than a hurricane coming online in southeast Louisiana. In southeast Louisiana, you have these massive, large-scale hurricane protection systems that were built around the greater New Orleans area, the hurricane protection system around Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes. And so there's massive surge barriers and floodgates and levees that have cement T-walls on top of them. In southwest Louisiana, we don't have that. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that all of our shoreline protection measures that we've worked on so hard over the last several years in southwest Louisiana are actually intact, that some of the marsh creation projects are holding up and performing as we anticipated that they would. But look, this has been a very active hurricane season for South Louisiana. So as soon as all these storms pass, after each storm, we're out there assessing the damage to some of these restoration projects to ensure that if future storms come, they can perform as we need them to.
So essentially in the southwest part of the state where there aren't the extensive network, you just go out and past projects? You just double check kind of a thing to make sure they're okay?
Pretty much. And I mean, look, if when we do the post-storm assessments, if there's damages, then we want to get a dredge out there as quickly as we possibly can to pump additional sediment in there. Or if there's rock breakwaters or terracing things that we can go out there and fix in the near term, we're going to get out there as soon as we possibly can to ensure that that natural buffer is intact in time for the next storm.
Got about 30 seconds. Is there anything else, any message you want to get across?
Well, look, I think that this is, let's call it what it is. This is the worst case scenario for the state of Louisiana. Everyone across the country should know of the devastation that is in southwest Louisiana right now as a result of Hurricane Laura. And it is far and wide. And to have Hurricane Delta now taking a very similar track as Hurricane Laura, taking aim at areas in Morgan City, Cameron, and Calcasieu parishes, this is a very tense and serious situation that the entire country needs to pay attention to.
All right, thank you very much. Chip Klein, we certainly do appreciate it. Chairman with the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. Best of luck in our hearts as a lot of Americans going out to the state of Louisiana and everybody that's dealing with it's been a really rough hurricane season. So thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
We do appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
And again, where we are right now in Baton Rouge. And here in Baton Rouge, of course, state of emergency has been issued, and they've asked for assistance from the federal government as well. So they are taking steps here, being proactive ahead of a hurricane in what has already been an absolutely devastating year for so many people here in the great state of Louisiana. We'll update you on the forecast of Hurricane Delta coming up.
Neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
Weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Weather Center Live. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarrett. Storm specialist Carl Parker is going to join us in a minute. We want to give you an update on what's happening with Hurricane Delta. It's less than 400 miles away from the Louisiana coastline now. A Category 2 storm with maximum winds of 105 miles per hour. It is going to start to take more of a northerly turn later on tonight and move up towards the north and east. Landfall will be most likely late tomorrow or into the evening hours somewhere along the southwest Louisiana coastline as perhaps a Category 2 or 3 storm and then track up towards the north and towards the east. Well, as the Gulf braces for Delta, the west wants some weather relief on the fire front. Here's a look at Eugene, Oregon, and you can see there are some clouds here already. Rain finally in the forecast here in the Pacific Northwest, but that's more likely to come as we head towards the weekend. So hang in there. Let's take a look at the forecast here for Eugene, and notice you still have another nice day tomorrow with partly cloudy skies. The rain arrives on Saturday and Sunday. That should help with the smoke situation and also help with the fires for sure. Notice the cooler temperatures that are going to be on the way as well. The heaviest of rainfall is going to be from about the Cascades westward towards the coast, but still getting some of that moisture into the Intermountain West. We'd like to see it come here in parts of California. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to fizzle out and miss you altogether here. Coastal parts of Northern California should get a couple of showers, but that's going to be about it. There's a look at the fire areas. So the rain is coming definitely in areas that need it, but more acres certainly continue to burn in California. Things look a little bit more favorable perhaps about a week from now. Well, cooler and wetter times certainly welcome in the fire-ravaged West, but in a season of record-setting fires, a sobering realization that this could become the new and scary normal. Our Dave Malkoff is on the fire front in Santa Rosa, California, showing us how a climate that is changing is helping to spark new dangers.
This is an unprecedented fire season here in California. More than 4 million acres burned already. Not to mention the homes and the businesses and the lives lost all throughout the West. So what is driving all of this?
It's really nasty, Brent.
They're called Very Large Air Tankers. These flights over flaming hillsides are now a common sight.
And you're cleared to drop. Because there's no denying it, these fires are becoming larger, more destructive, and more frequent than ever before.
Things will burn hotter.
the fires will be more aggressive.
The Glass Fire in Napa Valley is now nearly 70,000 acres. In the past, a fire a third that size may have happened once a year.
This year, we're looking at multiple 300,000, 800,000, 200,000 acre fires. These are huge swaths of California that have burned this year.
But this is one of those recurring nightmares. For example, 56 years ago, the Hanley Fire burned through wine country. Then in 2017, a repeat from the Tubbs Fire. Same area, different climate.
That fire in 1964 took 3.5 days. What the same fire in 2017 took 3.5 hours. What's going on in California is really the result of all of the factors climatically and as humans coming down to ground zero in a really, really dangerous way. Fire department!
It's dangerous because so many more people are moving into the woods. According to FEMA, there are 41% more homes in the fire zone now than there were in the 90s. Areas that could have naturally burned in the past have to be quickly put out by these firefighters. And right now, California's windy season is just getting started. Diablo and Santa Ana winds could easily fan this destruction right into next year.
It's not just land use planning. It's not just more staffing. It's not just more defensible space and more vegetation management. It's more of all of those things.
There's simply more heat available these days. In the last 5 years, there's been an increase in temperature in the overnight hours. That allows the trees and the leaves to get super crispy and ready to burn when the blazing sun comes out in the morning. In Santa Rosa, California, Dave Malkoff, The Weather Channel.
And speaking of climate change, vice presidential candidates appeared in their only debate in Salt Lake City last night. Vice President Mike Pence and Democratic nominee Senator Kamala Harris faced questions about climate change that drew pointed remarks.
With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, the National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice President.
There are no more hurricanes today than there were 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the climate alarmists
Pence,
use hurricanes and wildfires to try and sell their bill of goods of a Green New Deal.
The west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs.
For the latest stories on climate, the environment, and sustainability, make sure you check out Pattern. You can find them on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. We'll have continuing team coverage with live crews in the field with the latest on Hurricane Delta. That's coming up right after this break. Stay with us.
It's real.
When your cameras roll,
This is something nobody can imagine.
our experts react.
What do you do? Oh my gosh. Jaw-dropping.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow!
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
You're watching the Weather Channel. We are tracking Hurricane Delta, a Category 2 hurricane at the moment. It could still get stronger before landfall. It could also, after getting stronger, possibly weaken. Regardless, it is expected to come on shore in Louisiana as a hurricane. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren in the Louisiana state capital, Baton Rouge, here along the shores of the Mississippi River, with Interstate 10 going from west in that direction or to the east in that direction. That's a big question we have with this hurricane, with Hurricane Delta. Is it going to shift a little bit to the west, or like some of the models are showing, maybe could go a little bit more to the east? That still remains to be seen. One of many unknowns, and it's always, I think, Carl, a little frustrating, even the day before landfall. As good as the forecasts have been, as far as the track goes, a little bit of movement can mean so much for so many people, including the people still recovering from Laura in Lake Charles.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Chris. I mean, if you look at the average hurricane with an area of strong winds, it's about 30 miles across. Well, if you have just a little bit of a deviation in that track, that can mean you get right into the very worst of it, or it can mean you're just outside of the worst of it. And you're right, that remains to be resolved. We're going to continue to watch every one of the model runs coming in. Chris, thank you so much. Well, storm surge is one of Delta's greatest threats, and storm specialist Dr. Greg Postel shows us why storm surge is so dangerous.
Dangerous Hurricane Delta continues to close in on the northern Gulf Coast and will very likely bring with it life-threatening storm surge. We already have storm surge warnings out for parts of East Texas and much of the coast of Louisiana. We may see storm surge inundation 6 to even 9 feet above normally dry ground. But let me show you what that looks like. We can zoom in using these maps produced by the National Hurricane Center. Let's go to Lake Arthur. This is about halfway between Lake Charles and Lafayette, Louisiana. What we've got here in these areas shaded in yellow is perhaps we'll see some inundation 6 feet above normally dry ground, and in areas in orange, maybe up to 9 feet. Let's go over to another location. Let's go to Guédon, Louisiana, where we also may see similar water rises. For example, in these areas in orange, perhaps up to 9 feet, the areas in yellow up to 6 feet. That can do a lot of damage. Let me show you what that looks like and show you why. 3 feet of water. Let's bring that up. 3 feet of water. That can knock you off your feet. It is too late to evacuate if the water gets this high. How about above that? Let's go to 6 feet. 6 feet, that's just above my head. Things as big as cars, in fact, cars floating around, moving things and knocking things out of their way. Toxic chemicals may also be in this water. Let's go above that. How about 9 feet? 9 feet of water? This is practically unsurvivable. The only way out is up. This is exactly why we tell you to follow the advice of the local officials. If they ask you to evacuate, do so. Make sure you listen to the forecast from the Weather Channel and from the National Hurricane Center. And please, everyone, be safe.
All right, Craig, thank you so much. And let's take a look at the storm surge warning once again. This is not just a coastal issue in Louisiana because there's so much intertidal area, all that area where there is marsh and estuaries. You've got the potential for storm surge to move well inland. There you see between Abbeville and Lake Charles, as much as 45 miles inland is where the storm surge warning is now in effect. That does include Morgan City and much of southeast Louisiana, including Plaquemines Parish there in areas outside of that hurricane risk reduction zone in New Orleans. So even though New Orleans is not going to get nearly the same windstorm that we'll see in southwest Louisiana, we certainly could see a significant water level rise in areas that are outside of those elaborate levees around New Orleans. So this is storm surge potential, and this does not mean that all of these areas are going to see this. This rather means this is the worst case scenario where you have the worst of it coming in. And we do think that based on the modeling, based on the timing and the track, and also the intensity of the storm, that likely they're going to see as much as 7 to 11 feet of surge anywhere from east of Cameron towards Vermilion Bay there near Avery Island, and then on eastward towards Houma as well. And again, remember that that is going to penetrate well inland. This is likely going to be maximizing tomorrow evening. High tide, by the way, is going to be late tomorrow, about midnight at Freshwater Bayou. That is in Vermilion Bay. And when you look at the wind field here, of course, you have this area of water that's being piled up in the very large waves. Winds just starting to come on shore early tomorrow, but by later tomorrow, that's when we're really starting to see this very strong onshore push over a long stretch of the Louisiana coastline because you've got a larger wind field. So again, that's going to extend through those areas along much of the Louisiana coast, but centered on Vermilion Bay in particular. We'll have much more on this dangerous storm coming up in just a few minutes.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network,
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
the Weather Channel.
You're watching the Weather Channel. We are tracking Hurricane Delta, a Category 2 storm right now. It is a hurricane that has a good chance of becoming a major hurricane, possibly a Category 3 hurricane before it makes landfall. Also, it has a chance of weakening, going back down to a 2, possibly a 1, or still a reasonable possibility that it could remain a Category 3 once it makes its way onshore at some point during the day tomorrow, and the threat for hurricane force winds will extend well inland away from the coast. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren reporting live right here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Louisiana's state capital, alongside the Mississippi River, with Interstate 10 off in the distance. Heavily traveled Interstate 10 today. A lot of big trucks, a lot of cars going by here. The river is flowing to the south, so that is west in that direction over there. And on this side of the river, we are on the eastern bank, the eastern side of the mighty Mississippi River. So we're looking at a pretty mighty hurricane right now, one that started in the Caribbean, went across the Yucatan Peninsula from a 4, weakening and then gaining strength again. Let's go to storm specialist Carl Parker with a look at the very latest with Delta right now and what you, Carl, think we can expect in the short term. Just for the rest of the day, what are you looking for from the National Hurricane Center? What are you most interested and concerned to see from them?
Well, you know, the storm is in an area where it's got plenty of time right now over warm water and favorable conditions. So we do expect that it is going to strengthen, and it's showing some signs of that right now. Category 2 with 105 mile per hour wind. But when you look at the visible satellite imagery, you see the eye is beginning to clear out from time to time there, not consistently, but we are seeing some some clearing there towards the center of the storm. And also, you know, notice this big bursting of very tall thunderstorms all around the west and south side there. If that wraps around totally and we see more of a well-defined eye, we'll know that we're going into a strengthening phase, and it is expected to get stronger. Forecast calling for it to get up to 115 miles per hour, and then we'll see some gradual weakening as it's nearing the coast. So it could very well be a Category 2 as it is coming in, and that is likely going to be tomorrow evening. There you see the intensity forecast. So a little bit of an uptick in the intensity, then it starts to decline right around the time that it's making landfall. But even if it's at 105 miles per hour at landfall, that is still going to be a very powerful storm and a larger storm too, which is going to affect a huge section of not just the Louisiana coast, but areas that are well inland. This is the forecast from the Hurricane Center looking at the wind field or the area of strong winds. Very large area of tropical storm force winds, but of course we're really concerned about those hurricane force winds, which start to edge in most likely late tomorrow afternoon, then through the evening come up into areas of southwest Louisiana. And right now, according to their forecast, it may be that core, that most dangerous part of the storm, is just a little to the east of Lake Charles, but a very small deviation, just a little bit of a deviation in the track to the west could bring that core more squarely into Lake Charles. So it's entirely possible that we get into the worst of this storm there in Lake Charles, which is just heartbreaking to report given that people are still recovering there. We're hearing that they're still in shock after what happened with Hurricane Laura. And here we've got potentially another major storm on the way. We're also seeing some modeling indicating that it could track a little farther to the east, more between Lake Charles and Lafayette towards Gayda there in Bell City as well. So certainly that could be better for Lake Charles, would be worse for other areas, obviously. No matter how you slice it, it's going to be a very difficult situation, but our heart's really going out to the people of Lake Charles. And again, as I mentioned, the storm will continue up into northern parts of Louisiana and into Mississippi as well. And we do expect to see very strong winds well to the north because the storm is going to be moving right along as it is still a reasonably strong storm. Hurricane warnings extending all the way up and into Alexandria. So some differences here, Jackie, as with respect to previous storms that we've seen, but this is just awful to see that, the same part of the state is in for another big storm.
Yeah, so you mentioned Lake Charles there. Just south of there is Cameron and Cameron Parish, which is right on the water there. They took a direct hit from Laura, which was 6 weeks ago. And now joining us on the phone is Ashley Bowler. She's the Assistant Director of the Cameron Parish, Louisiana Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. Thanks so much for being with us here today, Ashley, first of all.
Thank you.
Can't imagine what's going through your heads right now. I know evacuations are mandatory and underway right now. How is that process going, first of all?
It's going pretty well, actually. Any of the residents that had brought down equipment or travel trailers to begin working on their property and making repairs, if they had anything to repair, they've been pulling stuff out for 2 days now. They did not wait for us to make the call. They've been staying aware, which is what we want people to do. And we're just stressing to everybody that you do need to get out. Every storm is different. If your structure did happen to survive Laura, it could be compromised and it may not survive Delta. So we don't want people to take that chance.
Yeah, what is the status of the parish after Laura? I mean, how much of the area sustained significant damage?
About 70%. It was pretty significant. Devastating doesn't even cover the word. It's very, very hard to look at an area that you grew up in that was just devastated a short 15 years ago, and to go through it all over again. And of course, we had Ike in 2008 as well. So we feel like we've kind of met our quota for hurricanes for a while, but apparently Mother Nature disagrees.
Not to mention Rita and Ike, that you've had in recent history as well. How do you even begin to prepare for another hurricane that's coming when you're so compromised?
Well, I don't know if you're really prepared. We never lifted the mandatory evacuation from Laura because we still had a wide range of our parish that had no power. So I think everybody was still in response mode anyway. But there are some people that don't really want to believe that you can be hit twice in 1 year, let alone twice within 42 days. So we were trying to stress the point that this is possible and this is happening. And at each interval, when we get an update, it's looking like it tracks further and further west. So we know that we're not going to be the only ones impacted by this. Now, we do have a lot of debris in the area, and that's going to cause a huge issue as well. We're worried about all of that coming back onto the roadways, flying and causing further damages. But our hearts also go out to the people that are to the east of us that are going to get that storm surge as well.
So where do you evacuate to? Where have all the people gone to? And do you think that there are going to be areas that just aren't going to rebuild?
Unfortunately, I do think that may be the case. We lost a significant amount of people after Rita and Ike. So where our population was roughly 11,000 in 2005, it was down to about 6,700 pre-Laura. And sadly, I hope this isn't the case, but we may lose roughly 50% of those people. It's just very hard for people, especially our older population, to rebuild, and then to rebuild in the air.
It's tough. Such a beautiful place, too, there in Cameron Parish, Louisiana.
Sure.
Thanks so much, Ashley Butler. She's the Assistant Director of the Cameron Parish, Louisiana Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. We hope you could get a better case scenario with a little bit more of a track off to the east. That would put you more on the good side of the storm, which would hopefully help prevent some big surge from coming into that area. We want to head out live back into the field to our Chris Warren. He's well to the east of there and inland a bit in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Even though you're going to be north and east of where the storm will likely come in, Chris, still some big impacts potentially in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, tropical storm warning is in effect here. And when you hear warning and watch, if you hear a warning, chances are you're going to get that type of weather. That type of weather, let me rephrase that, is expected. So tropical storm conditions are expected here in Baton Rouge, at least at this point, based on the current forecast. And there's a flash flood watch in effect here in Baton Rouge. So that means flash flooding is a possibility. So strong winds and rain are coming. Strong winds to tropical storm force are expected. So expect winds that are going to be in that 35 to 40 mile an hour range. You have 38 mile an hour wind. We're talking about tropical storm force, the sustained winds. But those gusts, you have the wind blowing really, really strong. Then every once in a while, a gust will come along and it'll get a little extra kick. That can be up to about 55 miles an hour, if not stronger, here in Baton Rouge. The timing for this is going to be picking up into the afternoon. The weather's going downhill all day, but the afternoon into the evening hours, I think, is when things are going to be the worst here. And then through, in some cases, some parts of South and Central Louisiana during the overnight hours, going into the middle of the night hours on Saturday morning. So Friday night going into Saturday morning. So today's the day. Today's the last day here with just a few showers. There could be some thunderstorms, but the winds are going to be picking up as the day goes on tomorrow, with some of the heaviest rainfall expected just to the west of where I am here. Here in Baton Rouge, could see a couple of inches of rain. Some areas closer to about 10 inches of rain. And if this system were to slow down or it would behave like past systems we've seen, it could be a heck of a lot more rain than what we're expecting at this point. But at 10 inches, so when you see that up to 9, maybe 10 inches, flash flooding certainly is a concern. Let's go now to storm specialist Carl Parker. And Carl, when we look at this system, and I looked at the visible satellite a couple moments ago, and it does look like it is starting to get an eye. It looks like there may be some strengthening going on here. How important is what happens in the next, say, 6 to 8 hours, do you think, for what we could end up with tomorrow?
I think it's extremely important, Chris, because it's really going to be about what happens today and tonight, and then tomorrow it's going to be approaching, and we know that the shear is going to be increasing as the storm is approaching, and it's also going to be getting over cooler water. But right now, conditions are going to be very, very favorable, and that's exactly what Chris is talking about. You can see that eye is beginning to clear out. It's not consistently cleared out, but certainly we're seeing it sort of wax and wane there. And then when you look at the infrared imagery, you can see that we're also seeing some thunderstorms wrapping about that eye, where we've seen a little bit of degradation of the convection on the east side. It looks like they're trying to wrap about that eye. And if we see more of that, more of a ring of storms around a cleared out eye, then we know that it is likely going to be going into a period of intensification. Chris?
And we've been talking about the worst of the weather happening in a relatively small area. So the movement of this, where that eye goes in the surrounding eye wall and the worst of the worst weather, will be displaced along with the track. So the size of the storm is going to make a big difference. Carl, what do you think the chances are this could grow significantly so that area where hurricane force winds are expected could expand?
Well, right now it is a pretty large storm. It's got an eye that is 40 miles across, which is definitely larger than average. And so, when we look at the Hurricane Center's forecast for those hurricane force winds, we do see a pretty sizable area of very strong winds, of hurricane force winds. Now, here in their latest forecast, and we're going to get a new forecast package from the Hurricane Center coming up at 5 p.m., you see the core of the storm starting to come into southwest Louisiana tomorrow late afternoon, early evening, and then as the National Hurricane Center sees it, moving perhaps just to the east of Lake Charles. But as we've talked about before, Chris, this is going to be such a close call. And while the modeling in a broad scale is actually very, very good, and it's all converging on the idea of the storm going southwest Louisiana. Then when you get down to these details, a difference in a track of 20 to 30 to 40 miles makes a very, very big difference in terms of who is going to get what. And so if it happened just like this, it would be possible that Lake Charles would be on the side of the storm that wouldn't get quite as much wind. We tend to find a lot more wind on the east side of the circulation, so more of that would be more towards Gaydaw and Bell City and also Lake Arthur. But a little bit of a deviation to the west, which is entirely possible, would bring Lake Charles more squarely into that hurricane force wind. And that is, just an awful thing to think about given all that they have gone through and are going through. We're hoping that that doesn't happen. But of course, if it tracks farther east and we see a little less wind in Lake Charles, that means it's going to be worse for those towns that are farther east and just west of Lafayette. So, all the way around, it's going to be a very serious storm that causes a lot of problems. But in particular, we're so concerned about Lake Charles just because they've been knocked back. They're on their heels at this point and just trying to recover. Chris?
And no two storms are the same. We say that a lot, and it's so true. In this case, there's that relatively cooler water closer to shore, and like past systems this season, we've seen some rapid intensification happening right at shore, but they were slow moving. In this case, Carl, what do you think? The fact that there's going to be momentum of a strong storm that's not going to spend a lot of time over the relatively cooler waters?
Yeah, that is important. There's a concept called inertial stability. And so you're right. Once you've got a lot of momentum built up, then, that can stay with you. But we do think because there is going to be increasing shear and because there is going to be that cooler water, a weakening trend will begin. But where that occurs relative to landfall is also not something that is set in stone at this point, and we'll continue to watch it carefully. Much more coming up.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
We were ready for it, but because even though it's saying that it's not coming, you never know. You never know, so it can change on the moment. So that's what we get for being in the center.
And right now, here is a live look at New Orleans, 86 degrees. At this moment, not in the cone, so that's at least a little bit of good news, but I wouldn't say not out of the woods. So not being in the cone does not mean that all clear, all good. It's less likely you're to get the heart and the meat of the storm, but these storms are big. And this Hurricane Delta, is a big one. It's going to bring some heavy rain here to the first quarter. It's also going to bring some strong winds. So tropical storm force winds will be experienced, I think, by the majority of the state of Louisiana when we look at just the size of this and the impact that it's expected to have as it moves onshore late tomorrow. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren here. You're watching the Weather Channel. We are here in the Louisiana state capital of Baton Rouge, where city and parish offices will be closed tomorrow, as is LSU. They are closed tomorrow as well. In fact, a couple of students from LSU came up, a couple of fraternity gentlemen, saying that they were going to collect, and they are collecting at the fraternity, some supplies for the recovery efforts that will be expected here for areas that are hardest hit. So it's conscious, it's on people's minds here. Of course, being the state capital, it's on the minds of a lot of people who have to make decisions of what's going on. And yet again, dealing with another landfalling tropical system, a Hurricane Delta. It could be a Category 1, could be a 2. Can't rule out a 3, and possible even weakening. Can't rule that out. There's a lot on the table here as far as the intensity goes, but a strong storm will be moving inland. And the motion of the storm means some of these strongest winds are going to be going inland, pretty far inland. Maybe 4 or 5 parishes to the north could deal with hurricane force winds north of where it makes landfall. Just how quickly it starts to weaken as it moves in. With that momentum, though, it may not weaken enough or a whole lot by the time it gets to some areas that typically don't have to deal with hurricane force winds, including here in Baton Rouge, with the heaviest rainfall also expected to be closer to the center of the system itself and closer to where the moisture will be held together longer. And can't rule out the possibility that some areas in the center, near the center, pick up about 9 inches of rainfall. Looks like landfall is going to be happening tomorrow evening, but the impacts lasting through the state of Louisiana during the overnight hours and into early Saturday. So we'll be watching here in Louisiana. Right now I'm in Baton Rouge along the Mississippi River with I-10 behind me. That's the direction from which this storm is coming. Jackie?
Yeah, it looks like every corner of Louisiana will be impacted in some way, but then it keeps going, right? So we've got a lot ahead of us after landfall, where inland impacts are going to be bringing some heavy rain and some gusty wind. Take a look at this. This is Charlotte, North Carolina. Boy, you look gorgeous today, Charlotte. 84 degrees, beautiful blue sky, but the remnants of what will be the remnants of Delta are on the way, and you could be seeing several inches of rainfall that could lead to some localized flash flooding. So that is on the table for you, and very poor travel conditions expected by late in the weekend especially, and may linger into early next week. Now we've got some new video of New England, and you are still reeling from yesterday's wild weather, but you could also be dealing with more ahead with the remnants of Delta and a cold front that's going to be moving through the area. You can see the heavy rain, and we really had a lot of damaging winds. In fact, Massachusetts, you still got about 60,000 people without power statewide. You've got more than 100,000 without power in New York. So this storm certainly packed a punch into the Northeast and New England yesterday, and we've got more rain that's going to be moving in, unfortunately, over the weekend when you want to enjoy hopefully some better conditions. In the meantime, let's talk about how much rain is on the way for you and just how widespread this is going to be. So after it makes landfall, we're going to be watching it take this right-hand turn across the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys and on up towards the mid-Atlantic states. So this is the forecast of rainfall through your Monday. And one of the big areas I'm concerned about is with elevation right in here across the central and southern parts of the Appalachians. You get a little elevation that causes that extra lift and really can enhance the rainfall, and that's where our numbers could get up there 3-5 inches in a couple of spots. So Charlotte probably 2, but west of there you'll have a little bit more. So we're kind of getting the 1-2 punch with this. We've got the moisture coming in with Delta. We've got that trough in the upper levels of the atmosphere, which is going to help to steer it to the northeast, but we also have high pressure into the northeast, which is going to help to draw in tropical moisture from the Atlantic. And then we've got the cold front, so all that moisture is going to get fed up and along that front, and it's going to get concentrated there and bring some of these heavier downpours, and that is going to last into the early part of next week. So tomorrow, of course, the big focus certainly going to be on the coast, but also spreading into parts of the deep south, the Tennessee River Valley here on your Saturday. Gusty winds, Memphis, Nashville really getting hit with some heavy downpours. Charlotte, this is more of a late Saturday into Sunday and Monday event for you. In the mid-Atlantic, it's more of a Sunday and Monday event along the I-95 corridor. You can listen to our coverage of Hurricane Delta on SiriusXM.
This is something nobody can imagine.
Our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh. Jaw-dropping.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Tracking Hurricane Delta here on the Weather Channel, and on the right is the forecast cone. It's a cone of uncertainty, so The center of the storm expected to go either within this, I mean, still on the table, it's still a possibility the center could go over the extreme eastern part of East Texas, also all the way over to central Louisiana, and it could go in the middle, and a third of the time the center of the storm has gone outside of the cone. So still some uncertainty with this. But as you look on the left, see those blue tarps right there? In Lake Charles, Louisiana, still recovering from Laura, and the damage to some of the taller buildings there in Lake Charles as well is evident. And right now, what I want to do is I want to bring in Barry Milligan. He is a state senator, District 38, but you're also the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, the Senate's Homeland Security Committee. And what does that mean? I mean, you're going to be here when the other offices are closed. So you kind of explain what that is and what your responsibilities are?
Our responsibility, Chris, as a committee is to look for the welfare of the state under emergency. Obviously, we've been dealing with COVID since March, and now we've got another hurricane. We've been able to prayerfully not have to suffer through Marco. Unfortunately, fortunately for us, Sally went east of us. We had a terrible storm in Laura, and now all of a sudden we have Delta, and we're ready. It's a shock to the state. It's a shock to the system. Laura was terrible for the state.
Let's talk about that and those blue tarps that we've seen. Talk about how many tarps they are and exactly what we're looking at.
My understanding, FEMA has something called the Blue Roof Program, and my understanding is in Lake Charles alone, there's 6,000 houses that have that temporary blue roof, and it's basically a giant tarp. The worry there, obviously, is with another hurricane coming in, those tarps weren't, the blue roof tarps weren't made to sustain that. And so you already have so many damaged houses in the Lake Charles, Cameron, Calcasieu Parish on up that are sustained from Laura, that you're worried about this blue roof tarp coming off. And so it's almost like starting all over again. However, with FEMA's help and our state help with GOSEP, we're ready to go. We're pre-staging all those things, so the moment the storm gets out the way, we're prepared to step in.
And those homes belong to people that have had to evacuate?
That's correct.
It's been about 6 weeks, a month and a half?
That's correct.
People have not been able to go home. Talk about, because of COVID, the challenges of evacuating people, how many people, and the fact that they are still not able to go home.
It's a sad situation. Because of COVID, we've got giant shelters all over the state, but because of COVID, we elected not to do congregate sheltering to keep them safe, and so we have over 17,000 residents in hotels from Baton Rouge to New Orleans and over in Texas that would like to come home, but their home is damaged or you can't use it. And so many of those houses have the blue roofs, but there's so much sustained damage you're not ready to habitat. So we're ready for that. We have nowhere to send them, and so what we're having to do is we're having to use some of the mega shelters that we have around the state. They're staffed, they're ready to go. We're just going to have to use social distancing and a lower occupancy, but we're prepared for that, and we're already using the shelter in Alexandria, and we have one in Shreveport that we can go to as well. We're prepared. It's just COVID. When you got a game plan that we use year after year because we're a coastal state, you throw COVID in the mix, it throws that game plan out the window. So you're constantly scrambling. But the state does a fantastic job. Office of Homeland Safety does a fantastic job, and we're going to get through this.
So thousands of people still in hotels. What's the message that, because it's hard. I mean, there's intensity of the storm. It's where it's going. People may have been through a Category 1 and were okay 1 year, but no two storms are the same, and they don't interact with land and people the same way every time. What's the message? What are you trying to get through to people here in Louisiana?
Well, you know what happens. People look and they say, okay, we've got a Category 4 out there. It's going to be horrendous. We need to leave or get out of the way, and they take it seriously. We look up, you've got a Category 1, Category 2 storm. Maybe they don't take it as seriously. The main thing is stay tuned, because as you know, it could go anywhere at this point, right? We could shift any direction. And this isn't going to be a huge rainmaker for us. I think the central part of the state looks like it's going to have some heavier weather. But for us, it's the wind damage, which we've already got structure damage, and you got the tidal surges. And we just can't take that. And so really it's just stay tuned. To be on guard, don't let your guard down, be prepared, but know help is coming after this storm passes.
All right, Barry Milligan, thank you so much. And of course, you're going to be here in Baton Rouge here.
All the way through.
All the way through, all Louisiana State Center. We certainly do appreciate your time today. And again, just illustrating and reminding us of just what people are still dealing with. Thousands of people, 17,000 still in hotels, going to have to watch and hope and pray, especially there in Lake Charles with all of the Blue Roof program, all of those tarps essentially that are on so many people's roofs, that another hurricane is coming. So the track of this is going to be very big for a lot of people, and also the intensity. And we're going to be getting into all of that, the different possibilities right here on the Weather Channel.
Watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Delta. The latest on the storm is that it's a Category 2 hurricane with maximum winds around 105 miles per hour. Notice some changes that we've had here in the last couple of hours. That eye, which has been obscured for days now, is making an appearance, and it's fairly large too, actually. It's moving in a northwesterly direction around 13 miles per hour, and we are expecting it to head towards southwestern Louisiana with the landfall most likely late tomorrow afternoon or early evening. Well, as the Gulf braces for Delta, the West wants some weather relief on the fire front. Here's a look at Eugene, Oregon, and you can see there are some clouds here already. Rain finally in the forecast here in the Pacific Northwest, but that's more likely to come as we head towards the weekend. So hang in there. Let's take a look at the forecast here for Eugene, and notice you still have another nice day tomorrow with partly cloudy skies. The rain arrives on Saturday and Sunday. That should help with the smoke situation and also help with the fires for sure. Notice the cooler temperatures that are going to be on the way as well. The heaviest of rainfall is going to be from about the Cascades westward towards the coast, but still getting some of that moisture into the Intermountain West. We'd like to see it come here in parts of California. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to fizzle out and miss you altogether here. Coastal parts of Northern California should get a couple of showers, but that's going to be about it. There's a look at the fire areas. So the rain is coming definitely in areas that need it, but more acres certainly continue to burn in California. Things look a little bit more favorable perhaps about a week from now. Well, cooler and wetter times certainly welcome in the fire-ravaged West, but in a season of record-setting fires, a sobering realization that this could become the new and scary normal. Our Dave Malkoff is on the fire front in Santa Rosa, California, showing us how a climate that is changing is helping to spark new dangers.
This is an unprecedented fire season here in California. More than 4 million acres burned already, not to mention the homes and the businesses and the lives lost all throughout the West. So what is driving all of this?
Really nasty, Brent.
They're called Very Large Air Tankers. These flights over flaming hillsides are now a common sight.
And you're cleared to drop.
Because there's no denying it, these fires are becoming larger, more destructive, and more frequent than ever before.
Things will burn hotter. The fires will be more aggressive.
The Glass Fire in Napa Valley is now nearly 70,000 acres. In the past, a fire a third that size may have happened once a year.
This year, we're looking at multiple 300,000, 800,000, 200,000 acre fires. These are huge swaths of California that have burned this year.
But this is one of those recurring nightmares. For example, 56 years ago, the Hanley Fire burned through wine country. Then in 2017, a repeat from the Tubbs Fire. Same area, different climate.
That fire in 1964 took 3.5 days. What the same fire in 2017 took 3.5 hours. What's going on in California is really the result of all of the factors climatically and as humans coming down to ground zero in a really, really dangerous way.
It's dangerous because so many more people are moving into the woods. According to FEMA, there are 41% more homes in the fire zone now than there were in the 90s. Areas that could have naturally burned in the past have to be quickly put out by these firefighters. And right now, California's windy season is just getting started. Diablo and Santa Ana winds could easily fan this destruction right into next year.
It's not just land use planning. It's not just more staffing. It's not just more defensible space and more vegetation management. It's more of all of those things.
There's simply more heat available these days. In the last 5 years, there's been an increase in temperature in the overnight hours. That allows the trees and the leaves to get super crispy and ready to burn when the blazing sun comes out in the morning. In Santa Rosa, California, Dave Malkoff, The Weather Channel.
And speaking of climate change, vice presidential candidates appeared in their only debate in Salt Lake City last night. Vice President Mike Pence and Democratic nominee Senator Kamala Harris faced questions about climate change that drew pointed remarks.
With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, the National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice President.
there are no more hurricanes today than
Thank
there
you.
were 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the climate alarmists
President Pence,
use
I'm sorry, your time
hurricanes
is up.
and wildfires to try and
Thank
sell
you,
their
Vice
bill of
President.
goods of a Green New Deal.
The west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs.
For the latest stories on climate, the environment, and sustainability, make sure you check out Pattern. You can find them on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. We'll have continuing team coverage with live crews in the field with the latest on Hurricane Delta. That's coming up right after this break. Stay with us.
This is real.
When your cameras roll,
This is something nobody can imagine.
our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh! Jaw-dropping.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Tracking a Hurricane Delta right now on the Weather Channel. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Louisiana's state capital alongside the mighty Mississippi River here. Interstate 10 going in that direction westbound. And this way is eastbound. That direction, about 125 miles, is Lake Charles. Lake Charles, Louisiana, hit so hard by Hurricane Laura. And this now, the day before the storm, and thoughts and our prayers are for the thousands of people that are still in hotel rooms right now who had to evacuate from Laura about 6 weeks ago. Still not able to return home, and once again looking at the chance and the possibility another hurricane will make landfall near Lake Charles. But much of the entire state of Louisiana and states beyond will have to deal with what Hurricane Delta is going to bring, and it's going to bring it all. It's going to bring wind, it's going to bring rain, and it is going to bring surge. And, Carl, possibility, we could even have some severe weather in terms of some tornadoes, which is possible with most landfalling tropical systems when we talk about tropical storms and especially hurricanes. But a lot going on and a lot to work through, too. There's still a lot we don't know with how this is all going to play out tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's looking more organized by the hour, Chris, and we're going to take a look at that on satellite in just a moment. But first, storm surge, one of Delta's greatest threats, and storm specialist Dr. Greg Postel shows us why storm surge is so dangerous.
Dangerous Hurricane Delta continues to close in on the northern Gulf Coast and will very likely bring with it life-threatening storm surge. We already have storm surge warnings out for parts of East Texas and much of the coast of Louisiana. We may see storm surge inundation 6 to even 9 feet above normally dry ground. But let me show you what that looks like. We can zoom in using these maps produced by the National Hurricane Center. Let's go to Lake Arthur. This is about halfway between Lake Charles and Lafayette, Louisiana. What we've got here in these areas shaded in yellow is perhaps we'll see some inundation 6 feet above normally dry ground, and in areas in orange, maybe up to 9 feet. Let's go over to another location. Let's go to Guédon, Louisiana, where we also may see similar water rises. For example, in these areas in orange, perhaps up to 9 feet, the areas in yellow up to 6 feet. That can do a lot of damage. Let me show you what that looks like and show you why. 3 feet of water. Let's bring that up. 3 feet of water. That can knock you off your feet. It is too late to evacuate if the water gets this high. How about above that? Let's go to 6 feet. 6 feet, that's just above my head. Things as big as cars, in fact, cars floating around, moving things and knocking things out of their way. Toxic chemicals may also be in this water. Let's go above that. How about 9 feet? 9 feet of water? This is practically unsurvivable. The only way out is up. This is exactly why we tell you to follow the advice of the local officials. If they ask you to evacuate, do so. Make sure you listen to the forecast from the Weather Channel and from the National Hurricane Center. And please, everyone, be safe.
And Delta is going to be a very large circulation, so it is going to pose a really serious surge threat. And take a look at the storm surge warnings now in effect. This is not just a coastal phenomenon, especially in Louisiana, where you have so much intertidal area, so much marsh there. That storm surge could penetrate well inland, and the storm surge warning actually 45 miles from the coast, just west of Abbeville there, all across areas around Morgan City, into Plaquemines Parish, and around New Orleans as well. Generally outside of that hurricane risk reduction system that was put in place after Katrina. So this is a look at the storm surge potential. It does not mean that all of these locations are going to see this level of surge. What it means is that this is what is the worst that can be anticipated, especially near the core of the storm. So if, for example, the core of the storm is sitting right about there, then you have this maximized onshore flow right in there, and that would be driving towards Vermilion Bay, and that's where we could be looking at a surge of 7 to 11 feet. You do not want to be on the coast in that case. You may recall that with Laura, we got a surge of over 13 feet in Grand Chenier, and that was just devastating. Cameron also hit very hard by the surge there, and it's just very, very difficult to survive that level of surge along with waves and along with wind. And this is how we think it's going to play out tomorrow. The models have been fairly consistent in terms of track and intensity, and you see how the winds are starting to pick up tomorrow morning, and then things continuing to go downhill as we go deeper into the day. There we see 5 p.m. the storm approaching at that time, the core of the storm approaching. We'd be looking at a maximum push onshore near Vermilion Bay. The highest surge is going to be very close to that core there around the eye wall, but we'll also see a water level rise well away from that and more towards Plaquemines Parish. And then the core of the storm continues to move in through the evening, and the onshore flow continues right through the night. High tide will be late tomorrow night. We'll have much more on this storm coming up.
Watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Make sure that you take care of yourself, take care of your family. Don't wait until the last moment. Don't wait till tonight or tomorrow. Go ahead and make those plans and make your evacuations as soon as possible.
Today is the day. Be ready or be out. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren. You're watching the Weather Channel, and we are tracking Hurricane Delta, currently a Category 2 hurricane on its way toward the Louisiana coast. And we're going to get the latest from the National Hurricane Center, the latest update expected within this hour. It's the 5 Eastern, the 4 Central update from the National Hurricane Center. Oftentimes it comes in before the 4 or 5 o'clock hour, before the top of the hour. And as soon as that does happen, we will let you know. Also waiting to hear from the Louisiana governor. John Bel Edwards expected to speak at any moment. And when that happens, we will go to that and listen to see what the governor has to say for a state that has already had to deal with more than its fair share of hurricanes this season. Not even talking about recent history, but this season with Lake Charles hit so hard, recovering, and thousands of people still in hotels after having to evacuate about 6 weeks ago. But here we are again facing another hurricane approaching Louisiana, and it is going to be approaching pretty fast too with some strong winds. So it will have strong winds well inland. We could see hurricane force winds, possibly 4, maybe 5 parishes away from the Gulf of Mexico. Where I am right now, along the Mississippi River here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana state capital, Interstate 10, with a lot of traffic going from to the west or to the east in this direction. So, Carl, I want to get the latest right now on what you are seeing out there.
Well, Chris, we're looking at a tornado threat right now. I want to tell you about a brand new tornado warning in southern Mississippi. That is in Harrison and Jackson counties going until 3:30. This cell now moving to the northwest at 10 miles per hour. So heads up there in LaRue and Dantzler and Ramsey Springs. Possible tornado coming your way. And of course, we expect to see a much greater tornado threat as the storm gets closer through tomorrow and into Saturday. So right now, a Category 2 storm with 105 mile per hour winds, moving to the northwest now at 13 miles per hour. And as you look at the visible satellite imagery, you notice here that the eye is more consistently becoming visible, so it may be getting more organized at this time. You can see a pretty well-defined eye there in the last couple of frames in particular. So we may be looking at a strengthening storm right now. The hurricane hunters are en route. It is forecast to get stronger through tonight and tomorrow, getting up to 115 miles per hour early tomorrow. And then as the storm is getting closer to the coast, we expect that there is going to be a gradual weakening due to wind shear and cooler water temperatures. However, it could still very well be a Category 2 storm, and it's a large storm, so this is going to be a very dangerous storm taking aim on southwest Louisiana. Now, here you see the forecast for the area of strong winds, the wind field, as we call it, tropical storm force winds in yellow and the hurricane force winds in red there. You see them starting to come in late in the afternoon, early in the evening. And then, according to the latest National Hurricane Center forecast, we see that core passing just to the east of Lake Charles, and it may well be that they get in on those hurricane force winds if it were to happen like this. Now, what we don't know is precisely where this storm is going to go. This is the best guess right now from the National Hurricane Center based on all of the available evidence. However, there are some track models that are a little farther west. And so if the storm were to go a little farther west, that would put Lake Charles more squarely in those hurricane force winds. They would last for a longer period of time, and obviously that would cause more trouble for a place that has just been through so much already. We're hoping that doesn't happen. If it does pass a little farther to the east, it wouldn't take much. You might not see winds that are as strong. However, that would be worse for areas that are east, including Bell City and Gaydaw. And then, because the storm is going to be moving across and into northern Louisiana, we do expect that there's going to be very strong wind well to the north. We want to get out to Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards right now.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here today and for your continued coverage. As they should be, all eyes are on Hurricane Delta. I'm pleased to have with me again today Ben Schott of the National Weather Service in New Orleans. He'll speak to you in just a moment. We do have a fair amount to cover today, so I'll get to it. Last night, President Trump approved my request for a federal emergency declaration in advance of Hurricane Delta, and I appreciate his quick action. We submitted that request yesterday morning. He told me yesterday afternoon in a phone call that it would be approved, and then by the end of the day, it was. This is a big help for us to get in the best possible shape in advance of the storm. secure in the knowledge that our federal partners are standing with us and that we have the available resources and know that we're going to be sharing in the expenses as well. Unfortunately, Hurricane Delta is expected to make landfall in southwest Louisiana early tomorrow evening as a Category 2 hurricane and very, very close to the exact location that Hurricane Laura made landfall just over a month ago. Unlike Laura, there are several differences, and Ben's going to get into this more later. But as it approaches our coast, Hurricane Delta is forecasted to be weakening rather than strengthening, and it's going to be a storm that moves faster, and it should be moving in a northeasterly direction rather than a due north direction. Having said that, it is very clear that southwest Louisiana is going to get more of a punch from this than we would like to see for sure, because we're still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura. So at this time, I'm going to ask Ben to come up, go over the details like we did yesterday. If you would ask questions of Ben if you have them while he's at the podium, and then I'll come back up whenever he's finished to go through the rest of the prepared remarks.
All right, that was Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards talking about some of the preparations that are ongoing there as we're looking at another storm to affect southwest Louisiana after the terrible, terrible after effects from Hurricane Laura. And this storm is going to be not as strong as Hurricane Laura, but it could affect many of the very same areas. Let's talk a little bit more about the intensity and what we're expecting here. It is likely going to increase in intensity over the next day or so, and then we're going to see a slow decline in intensity as it moves towards landfall. And certainly that would be helpful in terms of the wind potential, particularly if it were to happen exactly like this. This is some of the brand new model intensity guidance that has just come in, and you see some of these models here taking the storm up to Category 3 to major hurricane intensity or just below that. Several of them do not, but then we start to see this decline as we're approaching landfall, and obviously that would be the best case imaginable if we could see enough wind shear and enough of a reduction in the water temperature to actually bring the intensity way down as it's coming to shore. We certainly can't count on that at this point, but it would be helpful if it were to happen that way. Now, let's talk a little bit about track here. And there's the forecast track from the Hurricane Center. We're going to get a new forecast package coming up in about an hour or so, a little less than that. There you see the USGFS model in its most recent run, right down the middle there. Ensemble members a little more weighted towards the east side of that track. So that would be more towards Lafayette and Gaydon and Lake Arthur and less towards Lake Charles if it were to happen like that. Also looking at some of the other hurricane models, we see something similar, basically tracks between Lake Charles and Lafayette. And then when we look at the European ensemble members, it's about the same thing. It's tracks between Lake Charles and Lafayette. So just a little bit of a deviation is going to make a very big difference in terms of who gets what. This is a large storm, and we're going to see strong winds over a very large area. And we're also going to be looking at a significant surge threat across the entire Louisiana coastline, and particularly just to the east of that core. That's where the worst of the surge is going to be, and that could be around Vermilion Bay, 7 to 11 feet. Life-threatening storm surge expected around Vermilion Bay and surrounding areas. Could also be very bad in Cameron again, even though you saw that with Laura, and this storm may be coming in a little farther east. Could be awful in Cameron as well as Grand Charnay. And then here farther east over towards Plaquemines Parish, we're expecting a large area of surge with that onshore flow because, again, you've got a very large area of winds. And this latest run of the American model showing the core of the storm, again, coming in maybe just east of Lake Charles. And if that were to happen, then the worst of the wind would likely be just east. of Lake Charles, but you might also be getting into some pretty strong winds on the west side of the circulation if it happened exactly like that. And we want to bring in Chris Warren right now. And Chris, the reason why we're so concerned about what's happening in Lake Charles there, obviously we don't want it to be worse for areas that are farther east and between Lafayette and Lake Charles. But Lake Charles in particular is so vulnerable right now. I mean, we've seen the pictures of, just rows and rows, streets covered, or houses covered with tarps, street after street after street. And, that's to say nothing of the emotional toll of having gone through a storm as strong as Laura and people trying to recover from that and facing this next threat.
And Carl, I cannot even imagine what it would be like to be in a hotel room, either by yourself or with your whole family, for 6 weeks, with knowing that your home has a blue tarp on it, which might be ripped off or worse over the next day or so. I cannot even imagine what so many people are going through right now. And Carl, I want to go back to a couple things that the governor mentioned, a couple of true points that I think have some nuances to them. One dealt with wind, the other with rain. The rain talking about this is going to be moving faster rather than slower, which is a little bit different than what we've seen earlier in the year, which will help bring down the rainfall a little bit. And we'll get into that a little bit more, I think, later. But the wind talking about that it's also likely to be weakening as it gets approaching to the land. And the nuance there, which is also true, right? That's what the forecast is showing. But I think the nuance there, Carl, is what is it going to be weakening from, right? So the forecast still showing a possible Category 3, but with this storm, nothing would surprise me at this point. So what are your thoughts on that? Trying to figure out what we're weakening from could still be extremely strong when it comes on shore.
Well, yes, there's no question about that. I mean, we're looking at potentially a major hurricane developing here in the next 12 hours or so, 12 to 18 hours. And then, after that, there's going to be this race between the weakening that occurs and also how fast the forward speed is. So when you look at the modeling here, we see some very strong winds extending fairly far inland. But yes, the storm is weakening. And so the upshot is that we could see winds, this is a worst case scenario right here. And so we could see winds gusting over 100 miles per hour in southwest Louisiana over a large area from Lake Charles to Lafayette and up towards Alexandria as well. But then hurricane force winds all across the state, basically, even into parts of southwest Mississippi. So, yes, there are two things that are going to be happening at the same time. One is that it's going to push rapidly inland. So whatever it is, it's going to continue to be, causing problems. But the question is it going to be weakening rapidly at that time? And some of the latest intensity guidance indicates that it may be coming down pretty quickly at that time. I'll go back to that frame. This is the brand new model intensity guidance, and you see this real downslope that's occurring there towards the point of landfall. And so, that is the real question. Where exactly is it going to sit? How are those two things going to come together? Where is that intensity forecast going to sit relative to landfall? If it were to happen like that, and that landfall in that case might be a little bit late, but if it were to happen like that, and maybe we got down to Category 1 intensity, well, obviously, Chris, that would be helpful in terms of reducing the wind impact and the surge impact as well.
And Carl, for what it's worth, last time you and I spoke like this, it was Beta, another Greek alphabet storm after this season exhausting the designated list. I was in Houston. You remember we were talking about how it didn't have that feel, right? It was almost cool in Houston, getting late in the season. I'll tell you what, just check the observation here in Baton Rouge. 84 over 75, temperature 84, 75 dew point, and it feels like it is 92 degrees.
Yeah.
So for whatever that's worth, it certainly does feel like we are still in the middle of hurricane season.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And you can really see that when you look on the water vapor imagery as well. I think I can bring up an image from the water vapor here. And, as we look at this storm, there is some dry air that is off to the west in Texas, as is often the case. but we're not seeing it really infiltrating the circulation at this time. You've got a pretty well enclosed envelope of a lot of moisture there, and that is likely going to be the case. Now, you also see the strong winds that are coming across Texas, and as the storm gets closer to the coast, it's not just going to be shear, it's going to be that it will inject the system with some of this dry air. And so all of these things, the dry air, the shear, and the cooler water are going to serve to weaken, and land interaction will serve to weaken the system. But the question is, how much will it weaken before it affects southwest Louisiana? We're going to talk more about that coming up.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
This is the worst case scenario for the state of Louisiana. Everyone across the country should know of the devastation that is in southwest Louisiana right now as a result of Hurricane Laura. And it is far and wide. And to have Hurricane Delta now taking a very similar track as Hurricane Laura, taking aim at areas in Morgan City, Cameron, and Calcasieu parishes, this is a very tense and serious situation that the entire country needs to pay attention to.
It's Chip Klein, chairman of the Louisiana impacts from landfalling tropical systems mitigate as much as you can, try to reduce the risk as much as possible. We're here in Baton Rouge. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren. Of course, here at the Weather Channel, we do have crews throughout Louisiana covering this, and Louisiana is where, for now, we have crews. We'll likely have crews in Mississippi as well, but we are expecting the big impacts, at least initially, to be in this state. Where I am in the state's capital, Baton Rouge, this is what we're thinking as far as the timing and what to expect. Rainfall, again, this is based on the latest forecast, and we still have time before this happens. So there could be some changes with this, but based on our forecast right now, could see wind gusts stronger than 55 miles an hour and about 1 to 2 inches of rain. But this is a tropical system. Whether it's, impacting here, tropical storm force winds is what's expected, but it's going to be hours potentially of some very strong winds. And we can look at the forecast with the winds picking up, especially during the day tomorrow, and peaking late day, more like evening and nighttime, but being strong ahead of time as well. So tomorrow's the day when you should have already had all of your preparations in play and done, completed. Here in Baton Rouge, city and parishes, government offices not going to be open tomorrow. LSU also closed to students tomorrow, with the game being moved to Missouri to Columbia. Tigers heading up that way for the game, moving it from here in Baton Rouge. So the rainfall that's expected with this could produce some flooding. There are flash flood watches, so that means with the watch, those conditions are possible. Warnings means it's expected, and that's what we expect here is a tropical storm situation. That is what's coming here, a tropical storm to Baton Rouge. But other spots in Louisiana, we know, Jackie, going to be dealing with hurricane force winds. And because this is a fast mover, it looks like 4 or 5 parishes inland may have to deal with hurricane force winds.
Yeah, it takes a while for that to ramp down, especially when it's moving so quickly. And you mentioned the flash flood watches. Those may get expanded with time, too, farther off towards the north and to the east. One of the places we're watching for the threat of heavy rainfall is Charlotte, North Carolina. You look absolutely beautiful right now with blue skies and 84 degrees, but rain on the way as we head towards the weekend into the early part of next week, and several inches on the table here. Now, another area that may be vulnerable is the northeast, and you're still reeling from yesterday's wild weather here, and you're going to get some more rain and some gusty winds due to the remnants of Delta, as well as a cold front that's going to be moving through the area. There you can see all the leaves getting blown down yesterday. You're still in the tens of thousands without power in the state of Massachusetts due to those wild winds that you had to deal with there yesterday. So this is going to have some far-reaching impacts if you're in the mid-Atlantic, if you're in the Northeast, and you're saying, what do I need to worry about Delta for? Well, you do, because you're going to be feeling those impacts, and that is on the way. So, of course, we're concerned about the coast and what's going to happen into the lower Mississippi River Valley, but also the Tennessee River Valley, the Ohio River Valley, the mid-Atlantic, and yes, even parts of the Northeast are going to get in on the rainfall. One of the areas I am concerned about where flash flood watches may end up getting needed here is going to be with the elevation into parts of the Appalachian chain. And so southern Appalachian, as well as the central parts of that chain, may see as much as 3 to 5 inches of rainfall. So you get that elevation, that wind and moisture gets lifted, and that can enhance those rainfall totals. And it's not just moisture from Delta that we're going to be dealing with. Delta getting steered by that upper trough that's going to be coming in, but we also have high pressure, which is helping to funnel in some moisture coming in off of the Atlantic. That's going to combine and get kind of nudged up against this cold front, this frontal boundary that's going to be moving through and help to squeeze out all the showers. And yes, a couple of embedded thunderstorms here too. So the big focus, of course, tomorrow is going to be on landfall, likely happen in the evening. We already have bands on shore now, and that will continue to track its way up towards the north. Saturday, this begins to spread into Nashville, Atlanta, Charlotte. But I think Saturday night into Sunday is when the deep south and the Carolinas will likely see the heaviest of rainfall. The mid-Atlantic, this is Sunday into Monday for you. And look at this along the I-95 corridor. This is going to be a big travel headache for a whole lot of folks trying to get down with heavy downpours from time to time to go along with those gusty winds. Well, not only can you get 24-hour coverage here on the Weather Channel, you can also listen to our coverage of Hurricane Delta on SiriusXM Digital Channel 721 straight through Saturday.
Cameras roll.
This is something nobody can imagine.
Our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh! Jaw-dropping.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
All right, now you are watching the Weather Channel. We are tracking Delta, and the last thing that people who live or may have evacuated from Lake Charles about 6 weeks ago want to hear. We can see that a lot of damage remains, and we've seen today a lot of damage that remains as well. So the rainfall that's expected is part of the story as this storm moves on shore, and the rainfall is bad because of what you see with the tarps. And some of the Blue Roof program here there's like I believe 6,000 homes in the Lake Charles area with blue roofs now, those tarps that are protecting them from the rain. And if they get blown away and the rain comes down, which is expected, that is going to be an unfortunate, very unfortunate situation. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren here. You're watching the Weather Channel. This is Baton Rouge, the Mississippi River right here, and that is Interstate 10 going in the westbound direction. And eventually, if you keep going in that direction, about 125 miles, you'll end up in Lake Charles. But that being said, if you go that direction to the south, this Mississippi River right here goes north-south, and so you're just slightly off to the southwest, and you'll get to the coast as a crow flies in about 50 miles, so relatively close there to coastal areas. I want to get you caught up right now here on the Weather Channel with what we know, some of the latest information that is coming into the Weather Channel. And Interstate 10, so an extension of the road that's nearby here in Baton Rouge, that interstate from Lake Charles moving to the west, so heading like in the direction of Texas, is heavily congested. And Louisiana transportation officials urge people evacuating and leaving the area to consider either Interstate 49 North or I-20 West or I-20 West as an alternative route there. Ferry access is temporarily halted in Cameron Parish, and more than 91% of Gulf oil production has been shut in. So we are still, in the time period where you have a little bit of time to prepare, but this is it. This is the day right here, because tomorrow is when this storm is going to make landfall. Likely late in the day, but Carl, I think we can expect much of, especially coastal areas, to see the deteriorating conditions in a big way, even early.
Yeah, it's going to be a very tough day tomorrow, no doubt, Chris. Thank you so much. And let's take a look at the latest from the Hurricane Center. Now 105-mile-per-hour storm with Category 2 winds. So we expect to get a new advisory coming up here at 5 p.m. And we'll see if there's been any change there. Hurricane hunters flying out right now. We have seen a little more definition to the eye in the last couple of hours, and that could indicate some strengthening and a lot of very deep convection or tall thunderstorms about that developing eye, that clearing out eye there in the center of the storm. And I want to show you the most recent model intensity guidance, because this is interesting. You notice that some of these models do bring it up just a little bit here in the next, say, 12 to 18 hours, but then we see a sharp drop off. And so one of the big questions is, where is that going to be relative to the landfall? Now, the landfall position we've got here might be a little on the late side. If you move it up a little bit, if it's more towards early evening than late evening, then obviously that's going to make a difference. But the point is, you see that the shear and the cooler water and the land interaction all really starting to affect the system in a big way. So there is a sharp drop in intensity, and it's just a matter of when that occurs relative to the time that it comes on shore. So it may be that we see a little less impact that way. Let's keep our fingers crossed. But this is the latest forecast from the Hurricane Center, and you see the forecast taking up to 105 miles per hour, 115, and then back down to 105 as it's coming in. We can hope that it won't be quite that strong. But what we do know is that it is a very large circulation, and it's going to be piling up the water and generating large waves. So a life-threatening surge on the way for much of the Louisiana coastline, that probably maximizing near Vermilion Bay. And then the core of the storm coming on shore, either very close to or right over Lake Charles, or maybe just to the east, maybe affecting areas, say, around Gayda and Lake Arthur and Jennings, more so than Lake Charles and Lafayette as well. And then because the storm is moving rapidly, we're going to see some strong wind making its way all the way up into northern Louisiana as well. So this is going to be a serious windstorm. Hurricane warnings in effect for much of southern Louisiana, including Lake Charles and Lafayette and Alexandria, well inland. And as mentioned, we are looking at a life-threatening storm surge. It may not be like this in every spot, but where that core comes in particular is where we could realize this potential, that's 7 to 11 feet, and particularly from areas east of Cameron towards Vermilion Bay, and then even over towards Houma as well. So a very dangerous storm on the way. We'll have much more on the storm coming up in a few minutes.